Before there were emperors, before the fall of Rome, there was a man who rewrote the meaning of power. A man born into a crumbling republic, who rose through blood, betrayal, and brilliance. He turned legions into weapons of destiny, conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and in doing so, ended 1,000 years of tradition. Some called him a tyrant, others a god. But whether loved or feared, he could not be ignored. This is not a myth. This is the life of Julius Caesar, the man who dared to take Rome itself. Put on your headphones, close your eyes. You are not watching a story. You are living one. The year is 100 BC. You are born into a collapsing republic, a city where glory is currency, and betrayal is tradition. Your name will echo through eternity, but before you're carved into statues, before your death shakes the world, you will be tested. By politics, by love, by war, and by the very men who swore loyalty to you. This is your life. You are Gaius Julius Caesar. Act 1. The Rise of a Roman. I was not born into peace. I was not born into power. I was born into noise, into ambition, into a city that devoured its heroes and crowned its cowards. This was Rome, and I was nothing but a name in it. The year was 100 BC. The streets stank of piss and wine. Vendors screamed over one another. Soldiers marched past beggars, and priests prayed to deaf gods. This was not a golden age. It was a battlefield, disguised as a republic. My family, the Julii, traced its name to Venus, to nobility, to myth. But in truth, we were fading. Old blood, but no coin. A noble house with a leaking roof, and no soldiers at its gates. My father died when I was 16. I remember the silence in the house that day. Not grief, just the weight of reality. A Roman boy becomes a man when he loses his father. And I had no time to mourn. My uncle, Gaius Marius, once hailed as Rome's savior, had become its threat. His name, whispered with suspicion, hung over me like a curse. And then came Sulla, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. He didn't walk into power. He marched into it, dragging corpses behind him and laws in chains. He declared himself dictator of Rome. And with that title came purges. They came to me with a command. Divorce your wife, Cornelia. She is Marius's daughter. She is dangerous. And you, Caesar, you are her husband. You will unbind the knot or join the dead. I remember the way they looked at me, as if I were a boy pretending to wear a toga. But I looked back with calm, and I said, no. Not out of love, out of defiance, out of instinct. I would not bend my knee to a butcher in a purple robe. Sulla spared me, but not without words. He said, beware that boy. There are many Mariuses in Caesar. I left Rome the next day. No fanfare, no allies, no gold, only a name, and a decision to never again let another man decide my fate. I crossed mountains with aching feet, sailed past lands I could not pronounce, and entered Asia Minor, where Rome was distant, and ambition was currency. I joined the army, not as a tribune or officer, but as a grunt, a sword in a sea of other forgotten swords. We marched in silence. We camped in mud. We bled in places that did not know Latin. The first time I killed a man, it was silent, not dramatic, not glorious, just breath, and then none. I earned no praise, no coin, but slowly, the men began to nod at me. And in Rome, that is the first step to becoming a god, earning the nod of other devils. When I saved a fellow Roman on the field, They placed a crown of oak on my head, the civic crown, not for birthright, but for bravery. They say that's when I became a man, but I disagree. I became a man the moment I was kidnapped off the coast of Cilicia. Pirates boarded our ship, filthy, half-naked, smelling of blood and salt. They dragged me off the deck like cattle, tied my wrists, laughed in my face. They demanded 20 talents of silver. I laughed louder. Fools, I said, I'm worth 50. They were confused, then amused. For 38 days I lived among them. I trained each morning. I wrote speeches. I recited poetry to the men who tied me down. And I reminded them each night before sleep, when I'm free, I will return, and I will hang every one of you from a cross. They laughed, but some began to laugh less. When the ransom was paid and I stepped back onto Roman soil, I did not run. I did not celebrate. I raised a fleet. I found them, every last one, and I fulfilled my promise. Not with rage, with order, with law, with Roman discipline. Each man was crucified. But first, I slit their throats, not to spare them, to remind them that Caesar keeps his word. By the time I returned to Rome, I no longer walked like a man. I walked like an idea. I saw the city for what it truly was, a circus of liars, a senate of old men clinging to broken rules, and a people desperate to believe in something greater. I had felt death, tasted survival, seen the fragility of empires, and I knew then I was not meant to serve the Republic. I was meant to bury it. Power is not given. It is taken. Act 2. The Climb. They say Rome was built on 7 hills, but no one tells you. The real climb is through men. The old men in the Senate, the generals, the gatekeepers, the liars in togas who speak of tradition while robbing the future. They don't listen to soldiers. They don't fear poets, but they fear the crowd. And I gave the people something to cheer for. When I returned to Rome, I smiled, not with joy, with strategy. I wore white robes. I kissed babies. I whispered to the priests. I greeted slaves by name, because in Rome, appearances are power, and no one wore ambition like I did. I ran for military tribune, then quaestor, then aedile. Each time I gave the people more than they asked for. I borrowed gold from men who hated me, through games that bled me dry, paraded beasts from Africa through the streets, and paid actors to praise my name while they passed bread to the poor. I was building something, not a resume, a myth. They called me the People's Man, a friend of the plebs. But behind the curtain, I was meeting with Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, Rome's greatest general. One had wealth, the other legions. I had the people. Together we became what history would call the First Triumvirate, an alliance built on favors, threats, and ambition. They thought they could control me, use me, but I was learning, watching, smiling. I became Pontifex Maximus, High Priest of Rome, not for faith, for access, for leverage. There is no better place to plant secrets than behind a curtain of holiness. Then I took Hispania, my first real command, and with it, my first taste of true power. I led men into fire, took cities with words, not just swords. And when the campaign was over, I didn't return to Rome as a servant. I returned as a force. I was elected consul, the highest office in the Republic. The boy they once tried to silence was now the voice of Rome itself. But a consul's power lasts only 1 year. I had no intention of fading, so I did what no one expected. I secured Gaul, 8 provinces of untamed tribes, roaring rivers, frozen forests, and opportunity. The Senate handed it to me like a favor, a gift to keep me away from their halls. But I saw it for what it truly was. A battlefield, a forge, a place where legends are made. I left Rome again, but not as a soldier, not as a senator, as a storm. And when I returned, it would not be to ask for power. It would be to take it. The crowd decides the crown, not the Senate. Julius Caesar. Act 3. The Conqueror of Gaul. Gaul, the edge of the known world, a land of thick forests, painted warriors, and gods that drank blood. The Senate sent me there to be forgotten, a quiet exile. But I do not go where I am told. I go where history is waiting. 10 legions, over 50,000 men. My voice became law. My victories, their salvation. The tribes laughed at first. Rome had never held Gaul. They said it could not be done. So I crushed one tribe, then another, then another. And I didn't just defeat them. I absorbed them, made them bend the knee, made them call me commander. With every village taken, I sent letters back to Rome. Glowing reports, dramatic victories, casualties hidden in ink. The Senate ate it up. The people cheered my name in the streets. Statues were carved. Children played Caesar's games in the alleys. But in Gaul, the blood never dried. I crossed rivers that froze men alive, laid siege to cities that held for months, watched my soldiers starve, bleed, and keep marching. I gave them glory, and in return, they gave me loyalty that no Senate could buy. They would die for me, and worse, they would kill for me. Then came Vercingetorix, the warlord of the Arverni. Young, brilliant, he united the tribes against me. For the first time in Gaul, I felt resistance, real, burning resistance. He struck fast, burned his own cities so we'd find no shelter, poisoned wells, turned nature against us. But I adapted. I learned the terrain. I turned retreat into bait, and bait into slaughter. Then we met at Alesia, a fortress on a hill, surrounded by forests, valleys, and hidden armies. He thought we were trapped, so I trapped him instead. Double walls, circumvallation and contravallation. 2 rings of fortifications, one to keep him in, one to keep his reinforcements out. We starved them, choked their supplies, let hunger make them desperate. When they broke, we crushed them. They say over 80,000 Gauls stood against us. And when the sun rose over the corpses, the world saw what I had become. Vercingetorix surrendered, not with screams, with silence. He laid his weapons at my feet, fell to his knees, and waited for death. I did not give it to him. Not yet. I would save his execution for Rome, for spectacle. Because now, I was no longer just a general, no longer just a politician. I was power, a living myth, a man with the loyalty of armies and the fear of nations. And Rome was watching, some with awe, some with terror, all with the same question. What will Caesar do next? I came. I saw. I conquered. Gaius Julius Caesar. End of Act 3. Act 4. Crossing the Rubicon. The Senate grew quiet. My victories in Gaul became their nightmares. Each letter I sent, each statue raised in my name. It wasn't celebration to them. It was a warning. I had power. Too much. They demanded I return to Rome alone, without my legions, without protection. They called it law. I called it a trap. Pompey, once my ally, now my rival, stood against me. The man I had lifted beside me, now raised. The Senate grew quiet. My victories in Gaul became their nightmares. Each letter I sent, each statue raised in my name, it wasn't celebration to them. It was a warning. I had power. Too much. They demanded I return to Rome alone, without my legions, without protection. They called it law. I called it a trap. Pompey, once my ally, now my rival, stood against me. The man I had lifted beside me, now raised legions to stop me. They feared I would seize the Republic. They were right. I rode south. My army followed, tired, blooded, loyal, and we reached the Rubicon, a small river, a line in the dirt. But crossing it meant one thing: civil war. I stood at the edge of the water, wind biting my face, my horse restless, the men silent. I looked down at the river and saw more than water. I saw Rome's future. I saw my name, either on a crown or carved into a grave. So I said the words that sealed everything. Alea iacta est. The die is cast, and I crossed. News traveled faster than arrows. Rome erupted. Some cheered, some fled. The Senate panicked. Pompey retreated, left the city, burned bridges, scattered allies. And I entered Rome, unopposed. I did not loot, did not kill. I restored order. Because I wasn't here to destroy the Republic. I was here to replace it. But the war wasn't over. Pompey had legions, allies in the east. He ran to Greece, planned to regroup, to crush me. I pursued. Every mile we marched, the gods seemed to test us. Floods, hunger, storms. But my men did not falter. At Pharsalus, the gods stopped watching. Two Roman armies faced one another. Brothers, friends, enemies, tens of thousands of men. One battlefield, one outcome. Pompey had the numbers, but I had discipline. I had men who would fight blind, kill with a whisper, die with a smile. The battle was brutal, fast, final. Pompey fell, not with a sword in his hand, but a dagger in his back. He fled to Egypt, begged Pharaoh for shelter, and there he was murdered. Not by my hand, but by cowards who thought it would earn my favor. They presented his severed head to me, wrapped in cloth, a gift. I did not smile. I did not thank them. I wept. Pompey was my rival, but he was Roman, and no Roman deserves to die like that. I had crossed the Rubicon, and now I stood on the other side of it, not as a rebel, but as Rome itself. If I fail, let it be for too much ambition, not too little. Julius Caesar. End of Act 4. Act 5. The Dictator returns. Rome was mine, not through theft, not by bribe, but through will. I returned from war not as a general, but as a god in the eyes of men. The Senate trembled, yet they welcomed me back, with open arms, with flattery, with fear. They made me dictator, first for 10 years, then for life. The Republic had crowned its executioner, but I did not rule with vengeance. I ruled with vision. I forgave my enemies, even those who had marched against me. I called it clemency. They called it weakness, but they were wrong. Mercy was a blade. They held it close, not knowing it was pointed at their own throats. I rewrote laws, restructured debt, expanded the Senate, filled it with men loyal to me, or terrified of becoming irrelevant. Bread flowed through the streets, work returned, Rome buzzed with life again. I rebuilt temples, restored monuments, launched colonies, revived the dignity of our ancestors. Not to honor them, but to replace them. Because what is legacy, if not a shadow of power long gone? I walked the forum with no guard, no shield, because I believed no Roman would strike me. And for a while, they didn't. They watched me reshape their world, watched their senate bow like servants, their republic dissolve like sand in wine. And some began to whisper, "Is he a king? Will he wear a crown?" I laughed when they asked. Rome hated kings, but it loved order, so I gave them order, and they gave me worship. Statues rose across the city, my face on coins, my name in temples, priests chanting for Caesar the divine. Not bad, for a man they once called reckless, but still, there were eyes watching me in silence, senators I had spared, old dogs from old days, noble men who believed Rome could be saved. They called me ambitious, as if ambition was a crime, as if the Republic was still something sacred, not a corpse propped up with lies. They smiled in public, but in the shadows, they sharpened knives. I could feel it. In every banquet, every ceremony, every handshake that held too long, every cheer that came a second late. But I ignored it. I had work to finish. Rome needed roads, calendar reform, new colonies, new laws, new future. There was so much left to do, and I believed, like a fool, that I still had time. I am Caesar. I am the state. Let them fear what they cannot stop. End of Act 5. Act 6. The Queen and the Empire. After Pharsalus, after Pompey fell, the war seemed over. But peace is never given to men like me, because I don't chase peace. I chase permanence. Pompey fled to Egypt, but he didn't find sanctuary. He found betrayal. His head delivered to me, wrapped like a gift, held by trembling hands. I stared at it for a long time, not with rage, not with joy, with silence, because I knew in that moment Rome had lost its last balance. Now, there was only me. Egypt was chaos. 2 siblings, locked in civil war. A boy king, and a woman they tried to erase. Cleopatra. She did not enter my chamber like royalty. She arrived rolled in a rug, carried across palace halls like stolen treasure. And when it unfurled, there she stood. Eyes like daggers, voice like honey and venom, confidence that mirrored my own. She did not beg, she did not bow, she simply spoke, and I listened, not as a man, but as an equal. We spent weeks in Alexandria, 2 rulers in a stolen world. I saw in her the same hunger I carried, the desire to shape destiny, to be more than a name carved on cold stone. She wanted Egypt, I wanted the future. So we made an alliance, and a child, Caesarion, the boy with my blood. The last piece of my immortality. Back in Rome, the whispers grew louder. Caesar is distracted. He lays with a queen. He walks like a king. Does he mean to crown himself? Let them whisper. Let them fear. I returned to Rome surrounded by glory. Gold from Egypt, ships trailing behind me. A queen following in my shadow. And Rome watched. Some cheered. Some turned their faces, and some tightened their grip on daggers. But I saw the world ahead. I saw a line of Caesars stretching through time. A new Rome, not run by bickering old men, but by vision, by command, by legacy. And in that vision, I stood not as a dictator, but as a god. Let others be forgotten in dust and ink. I will be written in fire and blood. End of Act 6.